Olá a todos. Hello everyone. Today the video will be in English. I'm gonna be talking with Amy. She has a really cute and wonderful new YouTube channel. Uh, we're both growing on YouTube, so that's a good thing. And I'm gonna talk with Amy, which is in Melbourne, Australia. So it's not that much different from talking to people in Japan because the time difference is 9 hours, and with Japan it's 8 hours, so it's almost the same. And the thing that made me decide to talk to Amy is that she has a YouTube channel about vegan Japanese food because she's from Japanese descent. So she has all her mother and grandmother Japanese authentic recipes, and some of them are already vegan, and some of them she uh, makes them vegan, makes them work for a vegan. And that's something that I'm interested to learn more about because some people ask me about having vegan food in Japan or cooking vegan in Japan, or either finding when they're there or producing vegan flavor. You know, the thing about not just making it work as a vegan, but enjoying food, either if they're vegan or not. You know, if they believe in certain things or have a certain lifestyle or not. Sometimes they just want to incorporate that in their lives. And I'm more or less like that. Like, I'm not a vegan, but I love vegan things, and I try to be as much because I think that's a very particular thing about people going back and forth to Japan. Is like we tend to understand that sometimes, and I guess this is a very difficult subject, sometimes if you're not 100% something, but you know that it is important to be as much as you can, and definitely a lot more than regularly everyone is, you just you gravitate towards it, you know. I'm going to talk about vegan in Japan and vegan perception in Japan, or among the Japanese, or within the Japanese fans, more with Amy in a minute, because I think that's something that we need to tackle and talk about it, because a lot of people don't really know that, for instance, in Japan, if you go to a place and ask for a, you know, vegan udon, vegan ramen, people will give them to you even if it has dashi, and dashi is made with fish. So it's the animal stock, it's not vegan at all. But they will give it to you, and you will ask, well, does it have like common dashi? It's not dashi made like with kombu seaweed or mushrooms, it's dashi made with fish stock. And they'll say, yes, but it has no meat in it. It has no meat. It has no, you know, beef, pork, whatever, chicken. It has none of that is there. So it works for you, right? And you know, the perception of vegan in Japan is quite confusing. And you have a lot of products in supermarkets that are advertised as plant-based. That's something that appears in the packaging a lot, plant-based, and sometimes even vegan. And then you go and read the ingredients and it has like a milk protein or something. So yeah, it's kind of tricky to follow vegan in Japan. So I'll admit Amy, she's already here. We're going to be talking. Yeah, this is Zoom. It's 6 in the afternoon for her now. Hello, Amy. Can you hear me? Hello.
Hi, hi, can you see me or is it not
Not
working?
yet,
Sorry,
but I
let
can
me,
hear you right.
I'll turn it on. Oh,
Yeah.
hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Lovely house, lovely plants in the background.
Thank you.
So I was just trying to introduce you, but you're able to introduce yourself much better than I do.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have a great YouTube channel, which
Oh,
is
thank you.
growing, and that's a really good thing. And,
Yeah.
and it's mostly vegan, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, sometimes I don't say vegan in all the titles just because I don't want it to like turn people off. Because I feel like sometimes, especially I know like in France and maybe in Japan as well, like you see vegan and people think it's like really kind of crazy. Whereas if you say vegetarian, it's a bit less like, I feel like people are a bit more open to it, but it is a vegan channel. Yeah.
That's really good that you mentioned because I was thinking, should I talk with you about this? Because that's definitely something that I sense in Japan, that Japanese people, or mostly Japanese people who have lived there all their lives, consider vegan to be too extreme. And
Yeah.
it really does put people off. And if you go and go to a place and ask for a udon or a ramen, and you ask for
Yeah.
it to be vegan, and they give you a udon or a ramen with dashi, and they don't even think about that, so their perception of what is vegan and what is not is kind of different from
It's so
everyone.
different. Like, remember last time I went, so I'm 23 now, but last time I went, I was 15 and I was like still vegan then. So it was a while ago. And it was so hard to find things. Like I would ask like I don't think they understood the word vegan at the time. So I would say like in Japanese, like with no meat inside. But they would come and they would have like fish or fish taco, and they would be like, oh, but fish isn't meat, or like fish isn't an animal. So like the way they see it, I guess maybe it's just like the words in the language is different to in English. Because when we say meat, or I think even in other languages, like, French and stuff, it's like more clear between like animals and like vegetarian, but in Japan it's more like fish is kind of in between almost,
Yeah,
you know what I
I,
mean? They
I
don't get it.
I totally understand what you mean, but most of the people who haven't been in Japan yet don't understand that. don't don't
Yeah.
figure it out yet. And it's something that if you go to a place like with a group of people and everyone is asking something, and you usually in Japan just say the same for me. You don't specifically say you want something for yourself. Um, it's like if you say something for yourself is bad because you go against the group and you go against the harmony of the group, and if you're like, oh, I'll
Yeah.
have that, but with this and without that, and if you're too specific with your order, it's considered rude in Japan, sort of.
Yeah, I think it's more also in like because it's a collectivist country because it's Asians like China and stuff. So you, I guess like Western countries like America and stuff, it's more individualistic. So there's sort of like less shame about doing things in your self-interest. But I know even my mom's Japanese, and when she doesn't eat meat, but when she goes to Japan, she'll eat it because she feels like it's rude to say no if it's offered, or if everyone else, like she doesn't want to be an inconvenience, or like you said, upset the harmony. So it's more about like keeping the peace and like not standing out and looking sort of like selfish or like different. I think it's a little bit of that.
Definitely cultural, more than anything.
Yeah.
And I guess that people who are, well, now it's a lot easier because you have apps like Epica or other apps, and you can just find vegan places all over the world, actually. But
Yeah.
now it's a lot easier. But I guess like 5, 7 years ago, uh, things will be a lot harder because you will have like those Zen Buddhist specialized restaurants with really
Yeah. That's so
high-end
good.
vegan food, but too expensive for the common traveler. And then you'll have like normal stalls of ramen or such. And in those kinds of places, like normally ranch price places, you'll find it really hard to be completely vegan. Now I
Yeah.
guess it's easier, but do you have any specific tips or tricks that people can use
Ooh.
around Japanese food in order to make sure it's vegan?
I guess like the first thing is like being aware of what is typically not vegetarian or vegan. Like I posted a video on like miso soup, and someone commented and said, "Oh, but isn't all miso soup just vegan anyway?" Because some people don't realize that I didn't even realize either, because when I was younger I would love ramen. I had no idea it was like beef stock, and when I found out I was like really grossed out. I didn't want to eat it. But I think first of all, like people being aware so they know when to like ask. And then if they don't speak Japanese, like I think it would be helpful to like maybe like write something on their phone, like have a few sentences of like, this is veganism, I can't eat this. And then maybe they can show it to the waiter or the waitress. But I Yeah, when I was in, I've never actually lived in Japan. I went to school for like 6 weeks or so when I was younger, and I was there when I was 15 for 1 month. But during that time, I ate mostly at home. So I would like learn to cook myself. So that's kind of why I started doing my videos as well, because I feel like in Europe and in Asia, it's really hard to find vegan or vegetarian restaurants. Like you get used to it living in like more of a Western country and you kind of take it for granted. So yeah, I think being able to learn to cook at home is a great option. And sometimes what I used to do actually in Australia, like years ago, when a lot of pizza places didn't have vegan cheese, I actually brought my own cheese to the restaurant and asked if they could put it on instead. And that kind of helped me eat at the same places that my friends would eat at, but then I would be able to like compromise and find a
Yeah,
way to, yeah,
because the social aspect is so important. It's like when you talk to
yeah,
your friends, when you share family moments, precious moments, and you don't want to be a part of that too. And so
yeah,
how to navigate, the social aspect of food and your preferences about your ethics or your food preferences. Some people are vegan for health issues also.
yeah.
So that there are
I
so
actually
many.
like,
Yes.
oh, sorry, I interrupted you, but
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
said about health issues, when I feel like in Japan, because they don't have that sort of awareness of like animal ethics. Like I think that's a very modern Western concept. Like I think third world countries and stuff, they haven't. I don't know if it's because they don't have like the privilege to be able to think about that, because or not, but like they don't really have that awareness of like, animal welfare and stuff like we do in Australia. So when I say I'm vegan, a lot of people don't get it, and that's why they think it's like crazy or weird. So what I did was I would just say it's for my health reasons, or I just don't like the taste of it, to kind of avoid
Yeah.
a bit of judgment. And then that way, like it's a bit easier, less of a hassle.
But
Yeah.
what you said is so true. It's completely true. Last year in October, I was with, a client. So she was traveling with a plan I did for her. And we visited an aquarium in Okinawa, which is, I don't remember the name anymore, but it's like a big aquarium and you have the common things like dolphins and whales, and then you have other types of fish and everything else. And she noticed, she asked to go there because she loves animals. She has a cat cafe in which all the cats are rescue cats and people can go there and be with them and then adopt them, in my own country. And she loves Japanese things and everything about Japan. That's why she was there. But she was quite shocked with the living conditions of the animals in the aquarium.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
That's something we talked about. It's like she was shocked and she was like, how does Japan not get it? It's like something
Yeah,
that's so common in Western world, and it's not, and it's a cultural stuff. It's a cultural difference. It's really hard
100%.
to explain if we go like, oh, I want to live cruelty free, and they're like,
Yeah,
what? But
definitely. I
it's
think
not a
like
bad thing. I don't want to be judgmental. It's just the culture.
it's so true, because I always think if I grew up in Japan and I wasn't raised in a culture that had those concepts, or so that I could even question my own beliefs, I wouldn't probably care, because like everything around, no one's questioning it around me. Like the reason I became vegan, like I didn't really think there was anything wrong with it, because everyone was doing it. But the only time I actually questioned it was when I would watch documentaries or other people talking, and I'd be like, oh, that's true. And then I would start to think about it. But if I didn't see or hear these people talking about it, it wouldn't have ever planted the seed for me to like question it myself. And because I think in Japan, there's not as much, and like it's more growing now, but it's not like common, that sort of way of thinking, so people don't question it themselves. It's kind of like not their fault, it's just a way of thinking
Yeah,
that they've not
yeah.
been exposed to or challenged by. Yeah,
It's the way you're raised. It's the school. It's the environment around you. It's the news. No one talks about it in the news. It's everything around you. Yeah.
yeah.
And do you feel like you're more drawn to cooking Japanese because you have your mother and grandmother recipes, or do
Mhm.
you like to cook all styles of food?
um to be fair, I don't actually cook that much Asian food at home. So when I was younger, my mum would cook a lot of Japanese food. So I was like used to eating it, but the type of Japanese food I ate, it's like it's really sort of like street food, casual. Like the thing about like mochi in miso soup and stuff, they don't really serve that in restaurants because it's kind of just like something you
Yeah,
would do at home.
everyday food.
Um, yeah, so like it's not like fine dining or anything like that. Um, but yeah, I tend to probably make more like Western foods, like I don't know, like curries, pastas, things like that. Potatoes. I eat a lot of like kale and stuff, but I will eat like Japanese food in winter quite often because it's so like heartwarming and stuff. But I
Okay.
kind of decided to show people, like to me, I'm like, oh, it's just miso soup. Like it's not a big deal. Like even to Japanese people, they're like, whatever. But a lot of Western people, like, because it's different and it's new, and I just thought, oh, maybe I should like show people how to make it.
And I
Yeah.
guess that sometimes they don't know how to deal with ingredients. It's like they
Yeah.
look at the blog. I'll share an experience with you. I was talking with someone about, I think it was oden or something, a, a,
Mm.
a dish in which we use konjac. And
Yeah.
I was showing them like a block of cognac. It wasn't even sliced or anything. And they're like, what the hell is that?
Oh my
And
God,
then
because it
when
looks
you open the
weird.
block in the beginning, it smells funny. So you have to raise it very often.
Yeah.
And they're like, do you eat that? I don't eat it like that, like a chocolate
Yeah.
bar. How do you deal with konnyaku? It's stuff like that. How do you deal with tofu? How do you deal with kombu? It's like the first time they grab it
Yeah.
is hard and it looks like a stick of alien stuff. It's like how do you hydrate it? What do you do with it? So it's dealing
Yeah.
with the basic ingredients that I guess is the main challenge at the beginning.
That's so true. I was asking one of my French friends, and she was like, I said, "Oh, what sort of recipes would you want to see?" Because I usually ask my friends that because I don't actually know what people want to see. And she said, "Oh, anything with tofu. Like, I really want to learn to cook with it, but I have no idea what types of foods would go with it, how to prepare it, and stuff." And like, even the dashi to me, it's like really obvious. Like, of course, you would just use shiitake and kombu, but like, most people don't know, or like they'll like when I looked up some recipes because I was interested in what other people were saying or how to make vegan miso soup and stuff, but they were saying all these like weird things like I don't know, like vegetable stock and like all these like ingredients, and it was sort of not really like the proper way. I don't want to seem like
But it's
judgmental,
not
being like, oh,
it
that's not
you're
the best
right.
way,
It's
but
not how people do it at all.
yeah, like it's like I'm sure it tastes fine and you can do whatever you want with cooking, but if you want to, I think a lot of people want to know how to actually make it the way it tastes in restaurants or like the Japanese way. And unfortunately there's not a lot of like people who are vegan and are Japanese, so people don't actually have much access to knowing how to make it an authentic way if that's what they want to do. Yeah, but even I
And
like cognac. I don't
and
actually
it's
know how
not
to
like
cook
you have those great Buddhist cooking monks having their own YouTube channels and explaining to us
oh
how
no,
to do,
no.
because I would love that. I would definitely
Same,
love.
same. And if
Yeah.
they did, it would be in Japanese because I
Yeah.
Japan's not like a country like Germany where everyone kind of just speaks English anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Every time I go, usually with travelers or with
yeah.
clients, every time I go to one of those restaurants and have that sort of peanut tofu, handmade or something, the type of softness, you feel like you're in heaven. And
Yeah,
I'm like, I want to know how to do this. Please teach me.
yeah.
Yeah,
Give me
but
the
I never.
recipe. I always do that at restaurants. Like if I go to a really good vegan restaurant, I always like innocently ask all these questions like, wow, this sauce is so good. Like what's in it? Because I actually want to like make it at home myself.
Same
But
here.
sometimes they're so secretive. Like they won't tell you. It's like, oh.
I guess they're like they feel they have to protect their own recipes because that's how they're
Yeah,
why they're
it's like
special and
secret.
why people go there. I feel it's not that normal to ask for a recipe as
Yeah,
it
that's
will be
true.
like with your neighbor. Oh, I like this, cake. Just teach me how to
Yeah,
make, and oh, I mail you the recipe. No, it's not like that.
yeah, exactly. So like with my channel, what I wanted to do was because I think like in terms of like English speakers, there's so many like vegan YouTubers, and they're all kind of like girls, like early 20s, like same as me. So I thought, oh, probably like it's already been so done. Like I should probably do something a bit more niche. And so that's why I was like, oh, maybe I should do Japanese recipes in English. And then I can do all those like Western recipes, but for Japanese people, because I don't think that they have
Yeah.
much access, because the recipes that they want would probably be in English. And the recipes that like English speakers want for Japanese food, a lot of them are on like cookpad and stuff, but they're in like in Japanese. So that's why I was like, oh, I can translate it for different
Yeah.
people.
And I think that's a great thing about your channel. That's why I found it. Because I think being bilingual is great. And actually
Yeah,
trying to be like you trying to be a bridge between the cultures and
yeah,
finding out what they need and what they need and how to communicate effectively about their
yeah.
needs, about their wants, and I'm all about that because
Oh, thank you.
I identify with that because I try to explain Japan and Japanese culture to mostly my own country's people, Portuguese, but also
Yeah,
anyone speaking Portuguese or Spanish or English who wants to know about Japan and Japanese culture, either in Japan if they want to go there and visit, or in their own countries with classes of arts and culture and stuff. So
yeah,
being able to get out of your own culture because you learn about some other culture, or having an ancestry in Japan as your case, and
yeah,
trying to be the bridge yourself because that's you.
yeah,
That's your
yeah,
old person, and I think that's great to be in peace with that, because it's so common for people to have a certain ancestry and not being in with peace with that, being like, I
yeah,
don't know anything about my ancestors' culture. I don't know anything about, being in America and being from a Mexican family and not knowing anything about Latin America. It's so
yeah,
common for immigrants, or in my case, Portugal, we have a lot of immigrants from Eastern Europe who
yeah,
actually raise their kids here, not being able to speak Russian or Polish or Ukrainian or whatever, and now they're at school and it's like they don't know anything about their own countries, so to speak. And I feel it's kind of sad because you lose a part of yourself.
definitely. And I think like when I was younger, I wasn't like really proud of the fact that I was half Asian at all. Like if my mom picked me up at school, I'd always be like, stop talking to me in Japanese, like just speak in English, because I was embarrassed, and like I felt like it wasn't cool. Like I felt like now it's definitely more cool. Like people are like, oh wow, that's really interesting. Like you can speak another language and stuff. But when you're younger, you kind of just want to like fit in with all the kids. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be seen as Asian. I want to be a speak Caucasian and stuff. But I'm really glad like my mom spoke to me in Japanese and stuff, because I have a lot of friends who never really, their parents like didn't speak to them in like their native language, and now they wish they could speak it, or like wish they knew about more about their culture, and they're having to like learn things as an adult.
Yeah, that's so common, either because the kids want it because they want to fit in, or because the parents want them to fit in. Yeah, that's definitely so common. But I think it will be more and more acceptable, not just acceptable, but considered to be a good thing for you to be
Yes.
aware and proud and knowledgeable about your own culture, about the culture, the place you were born and raised, but also about the place of your ancestors, because it
Yeah.
adds up. It's something that creates a more complex and interesting person, I guess, for me at least.
Yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure.
of course, it depends on the perception of each place. I
Yeah.
don't know much about Australia, but do you feel like it will be easy for a foreigner or someone with a foreign ancestry to live in Australia right now? It's like a happy place to be multicultural.
It's pretty good. Like, there's not really a lot of racism. Well, actually, Australia is pretty racist, but if you live in the cities, it's fine. Like, if you're living in Sydney or Melbourne, but if you're going more in the country, or um, part like more like the middle or like north part of Australia, like around Queensland, it can be pretty. It's kind of um, like in America, like the South and stuff is a bit more like conservative. Like Australia is still quite similar to that in some parts, but our cities are really multicultural. So yeah, it's good.
Have you ever considered to go to Japan to study or to work?
Um, I think more so this year, but my parents didn't want me growing up there just because, like, well, my dad speaks Japanese and he used to live there, and they just, I'm not sure really now, but especially at the time, they think it's a bit of a sexist country still against like women and stuff, and they didn't really want me growing up there. And also, I think like this, I've seen like my cousins and like how stressful it is going through the schooling system there. And I think, I don't know, that kind of like social conditioning and the sort of conditions like working there, a lot of people don't really get a lot of holiday after work. You know, they're in like the corporate jobs and they get like 1 week off. And I feel like that's maybe one of the reasons why suicide rate is so high in Japan. So it's probably not somewhere I would live long term. Maybe if like 6 months or a year would be really cool. But I think I'm just too used to like living in more of an individualistic culture that I would feel a bit, I don't know, I don't think I could live long term somewhere like Japan. But I think it's changing. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Same as me. I feel like the ideal for me, my own personality, is going back and forth and having work projects there and spend a few months there and then spend a few months in Western Europe, which I'm from. Because for me, definitely the most difficult adjustment will be women's rights and your role in society and how to be
Yeah.
a independent woman. You know, myself, I'm married right now. When I start working with Japan, I had a boyfriend, now he's my husband. But I always realized that if I went to Japan, you know, trying to live there long term, I will have to lose so much about my independence and self-reliance. And people,
Mm,
at least when I was on the street, people would talk to my then boyfriend instead of me, things like that. Or when I was engaged and I was working there for a few months, people asked me, why are you here? It's like, if you're engaged, you're set up. It's like you're gonna be married, you don't have to work anymore. It's like, what are you doing, like building a career? That's strange.
yeah.
That sort
Yeah.
of mentality put me off in terms of trying to live there long term permanently. It really
Yeah.
works well when I work with Japanese people. I really like it because I work in an international environment. It's not a corporate traditional corporate environment. So when I work with Japanese companies, it's more like projects about developing a specific tourism package for a region or something. So it's projects and international teams. So it's
Oh,
not
that's cool.
standard at all. And in that environment, I'm okay. But the traditional one, it's really hard to adapt. I don't know if it is possible to adapt.
Yeah. And I think Japan, like, I think most like Westerners, like most of my friends, a lot of them go on holiday and they think Japan's this like really cool, like weird and crazy kind of place. Like everything's so
Yeah,
different.
holiday.
It's so technologically advanced, and even like the packaging of it's like so perfect, and like it's like a unique culture, you know, it's so different to what we know. But I think a lot of people don't realize that like underneath all that there is still like a little bit of sexism and also like racism and stuff. Like I know Japanese people can be racist to people who are like darker skin, like especially Southeast Asians and stuff. Like they look down on them a lot. If you're white, it's a little bit different. They kind of think it's like, oh, it's cool, but you still will never be accepted as Japanese. Like even if I was born in Japan and I speak it like a native, the fact that I'm only half Japanese, I feel like I would never be accepted. Like there was this thing with Miss Japan, or it was like a beauty pageant thing, and she was
Oh
half
yeah,
Japanese, half
yeah.
black, and she got so much. I think
And
she got
she's
quite.
gorgeous. Oh my God, she's a beautiful
Yeah,
woman.
and she was born there and everything, but it kind of like felt that she just wasn't really accepted, like as being, yeah. So that's, I think, in my opinion, like one of the negative aspects of Japan, like that most people don't see and stuff.
Yeah,
Like my mom.
if you don't go there to live or work, you definitely don't come across it when you're just traveling
No.
for fun.
Definitely, definitely not. And like my mom is quite dark skinned, like she kind of almost looks Filipino, like she's really dark, but she's fully Japanese. But she even had really rude comments growing up about like, oh, you're so like dark or you're so black and stuff like that. Just because I don't know. That's the sort of
Yeah, and
mentality.
you go to any convenience store, any drugstore, the type of stores you have in front of the train stations everywhere, and you see all those creams and beauty products for clearing skin and whitening products, and you see
Yeah,
like the word whitening, it's the largest word in the package.
yeah,
And when I see that coming from a place where, for Portuguese nationals, if you're white or brown is the same, like you
yeah,
or Europeans in general, it's like you don't really have the notion. I guess no one in their right mind have the notion that Europeans are white. It's like Europeans are all colors
yeah,
and all beliefs and all. It's like no one in their right mind. I know there's a lot of those crazy people now, but I think it's a something that will pass. I believe so. But being in Japan and seeing all those products whitening it, and I was sort of at the beginning, I was sort of kind of embarrassed myself. When you're embarrassed about something that other people are not embarrassed themselves, but you kind of are.
yeah,
And I was
yeah,
like, don't you think it's kind of politically incorrect or sensitive to have those sorts of products on display?
mm,
And people are no, like if you're slightly darker, you should wear that.
yeah,
If you go to like a work interview, you should
mm,
wear that. If maybe if you don't want to, you don't wear it every day. But if you go to a date, if you go to a work interview, if you go meet up with friends in a amusement park and you're gonna take a lot of pictures, you want to wear that.
yeah,
Those sorts of things, like social codes, they're very
yeah.
specific.
They don't really have like, there's definitely a lot more political correctness in like, the US and Australia and stuff. And like, to be honest, personally, I'm not like a massive fan of being PC, but I know like in Asia, it's like they don't really have that kind of concept. Like when I went there, I was like 15 and I was in a bikini at this like
Oh God.
firstly, everyone was staring at me because I was wearing a bikini because everybody had these like kind of it was like a swimsuit but it was a dress,
Yeah,
like things like that, so people were staring at me. My cousin pinched like my stomach and was like, oh, you've got a lot of fat here, which
yeah.
I've never even been fat before, because they're so like skinny and stuff and it's not offensive to them. So it's like, oh, you, in my head I was like, oh my god, that's so rude, but then I remembered, oh, that's just, I kind of think like offense is pretty culturally
Yeah.
relativistic. I don't know if that's the
I
word,
don't
because
get
it's like,
offended anymore, but yeah,
yeah,
they poke you. They
yeah,
and because I'm a foreigner, definitely, and a gaijin, totally from head to toe, and I'm kind of big, so I have 180 meter. So I'm kind
oh,
of big. So they're like, "Oh, you're so tall," and then they poke me and like in the hips or something,
oh my
especially
god.
kids. And I'm okay with it now, but at the beginning it
Yeah,
was like, why does these people touch me?
it's so funny. You must be so tall because I'm 163 and I feel tall when I go to Japan. Like I don't,
Yeah.
I feel either, a little bit taller than average or like the same height as a lot of the guys. So I can't imagine being like 180. You'd be like way
I
taller than
have
everyone.
to be very thorough about researching hotels. Otherwise, sometimes I don't fit in the bed.
Really? Oh my God, that's so bad.
Yeah, I have to research like, what is the bed frame like? Should I
Oh,
book this place or
yeah.
not? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Or
it's so
or in the
different.
shower, like the movie in what is the title of the movie? That movie with Scarlett Johansson in Japan, in which they have a scene the shower doesn't reach the height of the person. That happened to me a lot.
Oh my God, that would be so hard. I remember when I like stayed at my grandma's house and stuff, they had these baths and they
Yeah.
were really deep. And then my cousins at the time, like I was 15, but they would all bath in as a family naked together. And I was like, what the heck is that? Like I just found that so weird that you would bathe naked with your parents and your siblings when you're like not a toddler. I found that so weird, but like they weren't as embarrassed. So yeah, this it's so cool to like see different things that are like they're normal. They're so different to like what I think is normal, you know?
Have you been to an onsen in Japan?
No, I'm too shy. Like I don't want to unless I can wear my bikini or something.
I advise you to go. I advise you to go.
Really?
It's really liberating because usually being young women, we don't see normal young women very often. We see
Yeah,
those Photoshop beautiful models on top of magazines and everything, but we don't really see normal women's bodies. Women who had children, women who have scars, women who are fat here, fat there, skinny there. All shapes and sizes, and everything's normal. That sort of idea that you have from actually seeing normal people. You don't really
right.
have that experience in a Western world. You have movies, magazines, very edited images.
Yeah,
And in Japan, I guess that because you see naked bodies very often and they're normal bodies, you're more aware of what normal looks like. So I
yeah.
actually feel less pressured.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I felt very liberating. It's like you get naked at the beginning, it's like it's strange. I don't know these people. But then it's
Yeah,
like, oh, normal people. So then I'm okay. Yeah.
true, true. Like I remember my mum went, and even she said she felt very awkward. I think just because she'd been living overseas for so long that when she went back, she wasn't really like used to it and stuff. Excuse me. But
I find it
something really
funny.
interesting that I noticed was um like I think there's quite a lot of social conditioning in Japan, especially in high school and stuff. Like they're very selective. I'm not sure about right now, but I know when my mom grew up, they were very selective with what they taught Japanese people about what happened in the war and stuff. Like they kind of didn't really say that Japan like did some really horrible things. And my dad, because he's an academic, he knows like all about it. My mom had like no idea, so she only kind of like she was very defensive at the start because she felt like personally attacked because like, oh, that's my country, that's my identity and stuff. But like now she kind of had to like learn what had actually happened, and she was like really shocked and stuff. So it was quite weird to see that like she grew up there and the whole time she didn't kind of learn those things or know and stuff.
I guess it
Mm,
depends a lot on the area of Japan. For instance, for my academic research, I go a lot to Kyushu area and especially southern western Kyushu, and I spend a lot of time in Nagasaki. So at the
mm,
beginning, my research were more about what is the international past and international relations of Nagasaki area because
yeah.
I'm going to use the Japanese expression because you probably know about that. So, Namban Boeki. So, it's like the foreign trade in the
Mm,
past of that area of Japan, like 16th, 17th centuries. So,
yeah.
that was my research at the beginning. And then as I started doing field work, I realized that it's impossible to know about that today if you don't know about international relations of Japan in general. So
Right.
then I dived into the whole thing of Korean communities in Japan, Chinese
Mhm.
communities in Japan, Japanese who have come from the Japanese colonies in Southeast Asia because of the war, and
Mm,
how do they get reintegrated, how they settled in Japan again, because I was coming across figures like 6 million people, and it's like, oh my god,
mm,
6 million people arriving in Japan in a period of about 2 years after the war, people
yeah.
coming from the rest of the Asia. That must have had some impact. It's a lot of
Yeah.
people, and coming from a very troubled, traumatic experience. And as I was researching about that, I came across this major difference between that area, Kyushu area,
Mm,
and the central and northern area of Japan, which is, as you mentioned, the sense of identity. So it's like because they passed on these stories from generation to generation,
Yeah.
People know about what the Japanese overseas were like, what living in Manchuria was like, what living in Singapore was like, what living in Korea during the occupation was like, because their
Mhm.
grandmother and grandfather told them. So they actually have a living account of things. They cannot find that in history books at all, as you said. It's
Yeah.
not mentioned in school, but they know about it because people coming from those areas stayed around there, and within the family system, they start telling one another. But the ones that only studied it from books don't know anything about it. And
Yeah.
the same with the effects of the specifically in Nagasaki area with the effects of the bombing, things
Yeah.
about what was the aftermath of the bombing, how
Yeah.
what was it really like and how you rebuilt after that. And telling if you study like the bombing, the atomic bombing from books is one story, and if you study them from hearing people talking about that or seeing old records, it's a completely different story. So I found it fascinating that when you have memory, living memory, and when you have living accounts, you have a
Yeah.
sense of history that is more lived, more real, that you don't really have in the history books, which is a completely different problem because it's economics and politics and what they want to say in school and what is correct or not. It's a completely different thing. It's not the
Yeah.
people's fault, actually. They weren't told at all.
Yeah. It's weird like how different like accounts of like what happened can be so different and biased and stuff.
Yeah. But I found it fascinating. I really love to hear people's stories.
Yeah, I actually did a like a research paper because I studied IB at school and I did Japanese as one of my subjects, and so I had to do this like essay thing on it, and I actually chose to do it on like veganism in Japan and like the history and stuff. And like this was a while ago, but I think for what I remember, um sort of like before the war and stuff, like meat was actually not eaten that much. It was seen as a luxury. Like people still had fish, obviously, like the farmers and stuff, but it was more like the people who had money would eat meat. And then there's like now I look at like Japanese food, you know how it's like Korean food, this side, it's quite like it's American influence essentially. And like even Japanese food, I see things like, putting cheese on ramen and like eating lots of meats and stuff. I feel like I'm not sure if that's a Western influence, but it's definitely changed because historically, from memory, I don't think they would eat things like that. Even things like, cheese, like the word for Japanese for cheese is chizu. Like they don't actually have it because it's an English word. So it kind of suggests that there's this like influence on what they're eating and stuff now. Like people are like, oh, they eat a lot of meat, but traditionally, I don't actually think that was the sort of diet that they had. Do you
They
know much about it?
they
Or
had such a huge influence of Americans, the
yeah,
American and American culture after the war. I think that this is oversimplifying a very complex issue, but it was basically like that. If the
yeah,
Americans won and they are, the winners, they had the victory, they are superior to us. Like if you had like a Bushido battle. And if they won, they are superior. So we should learn with them. It's
yeah,
that mindset of senpai sort of
right,
thing. Like they're the masters now because they won. And because they
yeah,
won, they set the trends. And if you get it like that, if you go around the idea like that, you understand a lot of things. At least that's how I figure things out. It's like, okay, they set the trends now because they won. So they set the trends about movies, music, food, politics, society, fashion, everything. And on the 60s, on the 50s and 60s, you see a lot of diners, really American style diners starting in Japan as chains. And
yeah,
if we go to I would say, a Joyful, a Yoshinoya, all those different restaurant chains in Japan, which are usually considered to be family-friendly style of restaurants. And they almost look like American diners from the 50s because
Yeah.
the model was important. And they all have hamburgers, a lot of things with cheese, ice
Mm,
creams, milkshakes, the whole shebang. French fries, the whole thing. Lots of open soda
yeah.
bars, everything with sugar. And yeah, when you go there, like the first couple of times, you're like, why is such an American thing doing here?
Right. Yeah. They love that though, because they probably think it's like, I feel like they find, I feel like Japanese people get hooked on trends a lot, especially like foreign trends, because it's seen as different and new. Like I remember like there was this one period I think when green smoothies were like really in. I just can remember my mum was like reading all these blogs on green smoothies, and I feel like maybe in a few years like vegetarian or vegan will become more of a trend because I still think it's a little bit seen as like a bit weird at the moment, kind of like on the fringe. But I used to love, what would I eat there? You know, Moss Burger.
Yeah.
They had like a vegan one. It was like a rice, I think it was like kimpira. So it was like rice cake and they had the veggies inside. Oh, that was so good. And I used to love Mr. Donut. Like before I stopped eating milk and stuff, I would have Mr. Donut, the pondering donuts. They were so good. I really miss them because they're not vegan.
And if you go to the market there, I guess you have beautiful products. It depends on the season. But the thing about you said having to cook at home in order to be,
Yeah,
properly vegan, that's really important, I felt also. And achieving a healthy diet is challenging when you're trying to be vegan, having all the
yeah,
nutrition you need. And going to open markets, not shops, not supermarkets, but
yeah,
open farmers markets, that's something
yeah,
that I think it's really easy in Japan. I don't think it's as easy in Europe, at least in Western Europe, to have a farmers market that quality. Because the thing
yeah,
about farmers markets in Japan is that usually all the products are organic.
yeah,
They are really, really tasty. If you go to the farmers market, it's a lot cheaper than going to the supermarket.
yeah.
And you have like uh, I don't know how it is in Australia, but at least in Western Europe, now it's easier for you to find the so-called ugly fruits and ugly vegetables, which are the ones who are not produced to be big and beautiful because they
Yeah.
don't have so much chemicals or they don't have any chemicals at all and they are organic. So they're kind of ugly because they're all different from each other and the shape is not right, but they are nutritious and they're tasty and everything. But in Japan, they usually have only those types of products in farmers markets. So in the
Oh,
supermarkets, you can only find the beautiful, big, round,
yeah,
everything. The apples are huge. They are huge. They are all the same shape and size. They're all beautiful and shiny, but then they have chemicals and then the taste is not that great. It's very watery. And the same with vegetables and the same with everything. If you go to the farmer's market, you have a lot of diversity. They might be kind of ugly in the sense that they're not, picture perfect, but they're very nutritious and they're really good. And you have a lot of more variety, I guess. So I'm a fan of markets.
yeah. It's kind of like reflective of the culture a little bit. Like I feel like there's this push for like perfection in Japan, you know, like everything there's this word in Japanese, it's like tekito. It just means like I actually don't know how to translate that. It's like not perfect, just kind of whatever, you know, like I feel like in Japan everything is like done a specific way. It's got to be, you know, how they work, like expectations, like I said before, even how they wrap and package foods. It's like so perfect and everything. Whereas here it's like kind of whatever, you know, they don't put much effort in. So what you said about the fruits is kind of, I don't know, that reminds me of that kind of mentality as well.
Yeah, I was shocked with the price of the fruits in Japan because I come from a country in which is whatever. Yeah, whatever to the extreme.
Yeah.
We're kind of too relaxed. But most things are good in that in that sense. And in terms of food, in terms of having access to fruits and vegetables who are delicious, really nutritious, and really tasty and great for you to eat it like that or incorporate in recipes, it's a marvelous. So everything is so cheap and so good around here. That's one of the things I love about Portugal, and Spain is the same. And so for you to have an idea, like one bag of 1 kilograms of apples, organic, will be like €2.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's roughly $2 as well.
Yeah.
So, but in Japan, you can find one apple in the supermarket, just one, for the equivalent of €2. So it's like a
But
bag of 1 kilo or one apple. So I was
mm,
quite shocked at the beginning. So
yeah.
that's why I started going to the markets. It's like, oh my God, this cannot be real. There must be an alternative to the supermarkets, there must be an alternative to this. Let's find a cheaper version of things because I want to keep eating my vitamins. So that's
Yeah.
why I found the markets. And then I realized I have that thing. Oh, they are so expensive because they are so perfect. They put so much effort in it. So it's like
Yeah.
one apple, but it's perfect and it's perfectly wrapped, and the package is beautiful and it has a little tag in it, and the tag is handmade. You have the extra,
Oh,
extra,
one
extra
apple.
perfect.
Yeah.
But
It's so
yeah,
much.
for someone that was not born and raised in Japan, is like, I just want to eat an apple. Please
Yeah.
make it affordable.
I think there's a lot of like sort of processed food I noticed in Japan. Like there wasn't last time I went, there wasn't much stuff that was more like whole foods. Like a lot of the stuff has like a lot of chemicals. Like even the snacks and stuff, I think here like it's more like chocolate and chips and stuff. In Japan, it was a lot of sort of chemical type lollies, like the ones where you add the powder and then you add this and that. Yeah, that's what I noticed actually.
I always say to people that if you have allergies with things like peanut allergy, think allergies with things that are usually used in factories in which you produce a lot of different foods. So you can have cross contamination in the final product. So even if your chocolate bar, it's not a peanut chocolate bar, but if it's made in the same factory in which they process peanuts, you can have a reaction, an allergic reaction to that chocolate bar, because it could be cross-contaminated with peanuts. So that
Ah,
sort of thing can happen to someone that is very severely allergic to something. And I always say to people that have those sort of allergies to get cards in which
yeah,
they have written in Japanese, I
yeah,
am very severely allergic to name the thing. And then if I have this, I have to be taken to the hospital right away, because if you have those sort of allergies, it's not very easy to find it in the packaging in the product, and sometimes it's not in the list of ingredients, but it might still be there by cross contamination. So if someone has allergies, it's not just a food preference. It can be a food preference if you want to be really, really, you know, strict about it. But I
yeah,
think people should take those cards with them. Another thing is lactose. People who are lactose intolerant, if they still consume dairy, if they're like vegetarians, but with some consumption of dairy, but if they are lactose intolerant, they should take those sort of cards with them too, because usually I guess that lactose and products containing some sort of milk, it's not obvious. Sometimes you have them in bread and you get like, why do I have milk in bread? But they
yeah,
do. They can have powdered milk.
yeah. I see. Yeah, I saw that a lot. I was like, why does this have milk in it? It's so unnecessary. I get so annoyed.
The cards are important. And of course, for vegans, that will be important as well, to have the card saying, I cannot have, and then list
All
in
the
Japanese.
ingredients. Yeah, that's good advice.
So what are the next videos you'll put up on your channel?
Oh, I don't know. I was thinking of doing like an ice cream video, like making like your like magnums.
Yeah.
No, I have this recipe. I make these like salted caramel magnums and stuff. Do they have dates in Japan? You know, like the little fruit, the
Yeah.
dates. Yeah, because I wanted to make one. I'll probably do it in English. I'm not sure. I sometimes I don't know what language I'll do it in. I might do one in Japanese as well. Maybe I'll do like another what I eat in a day. But
Have you done Daifuku?
Daifuku? What's that?
It's like, I don't know if it's called Daifuku in all of Japan, but it's basically mochi, and then you have the zuki beans, and in the inside you have ice cream, and usually you have a fruit
Oh,
flavored ice cream. You can have with or without the azuki beans, but you also always have ice cream and the mochi outside. So it's like,
I've tried those, but I really don't like sweet mochi. I don't know why. And I really hate azuki as well. I'm like actually a really fussy eater. So I probably wouldn't I probably wouldn't do that just because like I wouldn't eat it myself. But I don't know, like what do you think people would want to see?
I guess that based on my experience, what people buy usually in the supermarkets or convenience stores when they're there, everything with matcha is very puzzling for non-Japanese. They don't usually know how to cook things with matcha. And the fact that you can use matcha either in savory or sweet things, and you can
Yeah.
actually cook with it, and you can even make pasta with matcha or
Oh,
ice cream
really?
with matcha.
Oh
Yeah,
my
they
God.
have that in
That's
Japan. They
just like
have
so
pasta with
bizarre.
matcha, ice cream with matcha, of course. They have all sorts of things with matcha, cookies, everything. And because
Yeah.
matcha is a superfood and it's kind of
Yeah.
healthy for everyone, so
Yeah.
I guess that will be good. I would like to know more about it.
Okay. Maybe I could do like matcha ice cream or like I've made matcha milkshakes before. They're pretty
Oh,
good.
that's really popular with everyone there.
Is
When we're
it?
in Japan, because the
Okay.
summer is so hot, so humid, and even if you're not a really sweet tooth, you feel like you have to be eating ice cream or ice pops all the time because it's so hot. And the
Right.
thing you have everywhere is matcha ice cream. You go to a convenience
Oh,
store, there's matcha ice cream there in several different brands and formats. So
yeah.
yeah.
Nice. I was thinking of doing some baking recipes, because I haven't really done many sweet foods. So I like to do like healthy baking recipes. Like there's this brownie recipe I make using zucchini inside to give it moisture, and I have these like with this really good recipe for gluten-free chocolate chip cookies and stuff. But I was just thinking, well, it's probably like summer in Japan, so I'm not sure if like people would want to cook those. Unless if I did it in like English, I guess, yeah, that might work, but we'll see.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for
I've been
listening.
doing what I've been doing recently. I've been doing nasu dengaku, which
Yeah.
I really love. And I changed the sesame topping from sesame, I changed it to almond topping. But I've sort
Ah,
of grilled the almonds before, so they got a little bit more
yeah.
smoky, and I like
Yeah.
that. And I've been doing a lot of smoothies. Also, it's kind of hot here now. We are in opposite seasons, right?
Yes, we are. It's winter here.
Yeah, it's hot now here. Yeah, and a lot of fruit juices. Sometimes with a bit of matcha, just to give that kick in the morning.
Okay, I'll do a matcha recipe soon then. I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you so much for talking with us. Please send me the links
Okay.
to everything you want me to put on the description of this video. Of course, I will put your YouTube channel. I
Oh,
urge
so yeah.
everyone to go to your YouTube channel and
Thank
subscribe
you.
it It's really good. And you're so nice. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
thank
talking to
you.
me.
That's
But
okay. It was fun. I've never had like an interview before. And I like when you asked me, I felt like I was like famous or something. Because when I made my YouTube channel, I usually just did it on my Instagram and I would put it on my story. But I thought, oh, it's probably easier to do it in video. And I was so bored in quarantine because of the
yeah,
coronavirus. So I was like, I should just start making videos. So that's why I kind of did it. And I actually have like people subscribing. I was like, oh my God, wow. So
I feel
yeah.
like if we're doing it because we want to do it, it's not even
Yeah.
about how many subscribers we got. But I was also surprised
Yeah.
because my channel is kind of growing now. I guess it's because people are in quarantine and they're bored. So
Yeah.
think of that.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for interviewing me. It was fun.
It was really fun for me too. I'm trying to keep the channel alive now that I cannot go to Japan and make videos in Japan. I'm stuck here because I
Oh,
cannot get in Japan. They have this ban on everyone, like basically
really?
everyone. They have a ban or on more than 108 countries. So if you're from one of
Oh,
those countries, you cannot get in Japan. And even
yeah.
if you are Japanese, but if you have been to those countries, you cannot get in Japan.
Oh, that's
And
hectic.
even if you are like married to Japanese people
Yeah.
or have a child in Japan, but you have a child in Japan, like with your spouse, but you
Mm,
are from one of those countries, you cannot get in. You cannot reunite with your family. So it's
right.
crazy. The frontiers are closed. No one's
Yeah.
traveling, no one's getting in. So most people who follow my channel want to know about Japanese stuff. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm diversifying
Oh,
and
that's cute.
talking to other people as well and starting to do the interviews. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
That's okay. See you.
Bye. See you. Have a good night's sleep.
Thank you.